outwitted and outplayed South African authorities, but didn't outlast them. Convicted murder and rapist Thabo Bester, who escaped from Mangaung Correctional Centre and appeared in the Magistrate court in Bloemfontein today. We are joined by lawyer Bruce Hendricks, who has been following today's court proceedings. Bruce, in terms of what happened in court today and the wish to address the actual presiding officer, we've discussed how unusual that is. Do you think it's a good move from an accused appearing before a presiding officer first time?
Well, normally what happens, if you're represented, you don't address the presiding officer yourself. You do so to your legal representative. And like the attorney did in court, you turn around and take instructions. If Mr. Bester wanted to address the presiding officer directly, he had to terminate the mandate of his attorney in order to do so.
And we then did have the address from his lawyer to the court, some concerns around his safety in custody. Almost a bitter irony there because, of course, it's the lackadaisical security that allowed him to, like I say, outwit and outplay the authorities. Now he's concerned that some of that risk and poor management could put his own life in danger. In your experience, are those valid concerns for an accused to have?
Well, I think what they alluded to, or what he was trying to convey to the court, is that considering that he brought the reputation of the facility or the Department of Corrections in jeopardy, they might react to that and respond in a negative or violent way, and he might be prejudiced in that regard when he goes back to prison or to a facility. I think that was what he was trying to convey to the court. However, as the court pointed out, what happens at correctional facilities, etc., that's not in the hands of the court. That is the Department of Corrections. They deal with inmates and people that is demanded in custody. So it falls squarely within the Department of Corrections, where they place him, how they place him. What happens normally in court, the court issues a form, either J7 or J1, which determines whether you're released or not released, or whether you're going to a police station in custody, or whether you're going back to a specific facility, detention facility.
Yes, and I hear you. As much as that is the domain of correctional services, when it comes to bail hearings, sometimes the sentiment of a community can play into the decisions of the presiding officer on whether or not to release an accused. The risk they pose to society can come up as well. So why is it that when it comes to matters within a prison, that the court simply will not consider it in too much depth?
Well, you see, when it comes to when you have to release someone, the public consideration, or what the broader public thinks, it does play a certain role to an extent. In terms of when someone's remanded in custody, the court can't make specific orders as to where you would be kept and how they would deal with you at that specific facility. That is ultimately how things happen in normal practice.
Thank you. If we look at this issue of the ID number and Bester's queries around how he was deported back into South Africa, we've heard DAMP Glenys Breitenbach raise concerns about the mode of transport, that he was flown in a private jet, she says. But in terms of his doubts or need for paperwork, really, on how he was brought back into the country, that's ringing in my ear in terms of some other extradition problems South Africa's had of late. Do you think there may be any wind in those sails in terms of trying to find perhaps administrative faults or other issues with how he's been brought back and brought before the Magistrate's court?
Well, Mr. Bester and his legal representative weren't quite clear on that. What I would have indicated, or what they should have told the court, is that if identity, in terms of the ID number, if he's saying he's not Thabo Bester, or if there's any issue pertaining to identity, they should have immediately brought that to the attention of the court, because that ultimately plays a role whether the right person is indeed before the court. But when Bester was sentenced previously, or had to be sentenced, what happens after a court passes judgment and you get sentenced, and you're sentenced to imprisonment, or whether it's a fine, your fingerprints get taken, and they call that the SAP 69s, that gets sent off to our local criminal record center, LCRC, and that's kept on record. So if he's saying he's not Thabo Bester, one of the most simplest ways to confirm it is to take his fingerprints and compare to the SAP 69s, and you can confirm whether it is indeed the same person. So if I think is an issue, they should have brought it to the fore and requested that that issue be cleared up. And if I was the attorney on record and that was my instructions, I would have said, I want the bail application, because ultimately what they're then trying to say is that that's not the right person before court. Also, when a J50, like in his case, is issued by a court, a J50 warrant, they normally call it a bench warrant. It gets issued after someone is sought by the police or the authorities, and they have great difficulty finding him. That person gets circulated in the system and flagged. So whenever you try to check in or move to customs, you will be immediately flagged and arrested. So if a person is arrested under a J50 warrant, what happens is the person effecting the arrest must confirm the identity of that person, and normally they do so by writing on the warrant that I, sergeant or warrant officer, whoever, confirm that on the date and time I arrested Mr. Thabo Bester, and have him sign that is indeed him. Then that also clears up the issue of identity being in dispute.
I'm going to something you said at the beginning of this discussion around Bester really putting into reputational risk the status and security of our correctional services system. He really has evaded the authorities. He's been a kind of Bonnie and Clyde with his doctor partner. How easy is it to represent someone like this? And if he is finally put through the whole legal process, what sort of time do you think he's facing?
Well, there's a range of charges against him, and if you've watched all the parliamentary inquiries, etc., and all the investigations done by G4S and others, it depends ultimately on the person. If it's Thabo in this case, his instructions. If he says, I'm not Thabo Bester, it kind of simplifies the issues, and that's one thing that needs to be ironed out. However, if the person comes to the fore and says, listen, I admit guilt, I did do this, and comes clean, you can enter into a plea bargain with a prosecution and decide ultimately if you can package the charges together and see what you can do in terms of sentence.
Just to stop you there, I mean, I think he is quite a conspicuous figure at this stage. We all know what he looks like, whatever disguise he tries to, hide himself in. So the identity question might be a bit of a red herring. But you mentioned those charges. We're talking about escape, defeating the ends of justice, violating a body, and fraud. You're proposing a potential plea bargain, but surely they're going to make an example out of him because this has been so damaging for the state?
Yes, they will definitely. The state, and look, if the state has a strong case, your bargaining becomes limited, and you will definitely get long-term imprisonment. It will depend on all the circumstances surrounding that. Also, we will have to wait and listen and see what comes out from the co-accused during bail application, whether they're going to testify, whether they will be doing the applications via bail affidavit, whether they will be getting into the witness box and testifying. One thing I've also noted of Thabo's appearance is that he's being remanded in custody and he got another date separate from his co-accused, meaning he will not be present when their bail application is being heard. That ultimately, from a defense lawyer point of view, might affect his case at the end of the day. So he should have been present during the applications for bail, because whatever's been said in a bail application can ultimately be used in the trial. So whatever evidence the state gets out of that, they'll ultimately provide it or use it against him. So every step of the way becomes important now.
Yes, 16th of May for Thabo Bester. I wonder, just lastly, as a closing question, do you think these separate dates for the accused is an attempt to divide and potentially conquer, if you'll allow the expression, that there's a hope the state might be able to glean information and even turn some of the accomplices into witnesses in this matter?
Absolutely, absolutely. If you look from a strategy point of view, as a state prosecutor, that is what I would have done. You divide and conquer, you get the accused separately, because look, it's quite different sitting in the dock next to the person that you're talking about and giving evidence while looking at their face. So it is, in terms of strategy, I would say it's a very smart move from the prosecution side.
Well, it's a matter that certainly has got South Africans talking both in and outside court and Parliament. Bruce Hendricks there, a lawyer on air this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time.